Good evening. I'm Tom Ryan, and welcome to the TV studio, WKMC, the TV studio for the Mount Carmel Area School District. And at the top of the show, I'd just like to thank Dr. Bernie Steller, the superintendent, for allowing us to use the facility, and we are privileged to have with us the executive director of the Piaa, Dr. Robert Lombardi. Doc, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Dr. Lombardi is a northeastern Pennsylvania, Carbondale, I believe.
Lake Ariel.
As I said, Lake Ariel. And did his undergraduate work, and he got his master's degree both at East Stroudsburg University, and then went on to get his doctorate in sports administration at New Mexico University. He's been part of the Piaa since 1988, and currently finishing up his 6th year as executive director. Doc, good to have you with us. You are, in essence, the spokesperson for Piaa. However, it is a much more organized than once. You do not have absolute authority. You work with an executive committee, and you also work with the board of directors, and you have a wonderful staff. Talk about the board of directors.
Well, we have 31 people from all throughout the Commonwealth. 17 of them are district chairman and district vice chairman. The rest of the board is filled up with people representing either principals, superintendents, junior high, middle schools, girls athletics, registered officials, male and female, 2 parent reps. We also have an athletic director's rep, a principal's rep, a superintendent's rep. So we have a full board, and it may be expanding here shortly. One of our districts has picked up another number of member schools, and that may give them a 3rd representative on the board. So our board may be going to 32 very shortly.
How does one become a member of the board?
They stand for election every year at the local district committee. The membership elects district chairman and their representatives to the board. The other representatives that I just named are either appointed by that constituency or are elected from their constituency for a 2-year term.
And you must be active as an educator.
Yes.
In a district to represent
That's
that
correct.
district. That's correct. Now, one of the things I noticed in looking through the board of directors, there is no media representative.
No, there is not. But through the good work of Melissa Mertz, who's on our staff, our associate executive director, she annually has a media workshop with our electronic and print media representatives throughout the state. It's usually held in June. Sometimes we do it by conference call to help them in their travel or their input. But we solicit their input and help develop our policies for our radio and TV people, basically from that committee with her guidance. It's been great.
Interesting, since you started in '88, which is 30 years ago, how media coverage of high school sports has just exploded.
Well, it has really exploded, especially with the advent of items such as Periscope and other platforms where mom and dad or people in the stands can videotape a game and then putting it on the internet. It has really caused some challenges for us, some good, some bad. Some places, sometimes people are doing some things they shouldn't be doing. So you have a little bit of everything.
Well, and it's at one time it was all football and basketball. Now it's everything.
No, we have, I believe, 21 championships, and we just finished up one of our jewels, which is track and field, which is always outstanding. We usually have about 12,000 to 15,000 people at Shippensburg University for 2 days, and we had good weather, which helped some very good performances, especially with this spring's weather, which was awful.
Oh, boy.
We were concerned about some of the health and safety of our athletes because it got hot so quickly, but we have a great medical staff there. Our sport medicine team is second to none, and team tennis and individual tennis just finished up this past weekend.
Interesting. Now, we want to talk about your staff because these championships are delegated as who on the staff is going to take care of them. So let's talk about the people who do that.
Well, we have 14 people that work in our office. I'm one of them. We have 5 administrators that are handling all of our sports and interpretation of bylaws and the Constitution and enforcement of PIAA policy for our rules, and especially the information of contest rules, where we adopt the National Federation rule books for our sports. And we have probably the smallest staff in the country as the largest state. We're the 6th largest state with over 350,000 athletes and over 1,500 member schools. So we have quite a task. None of us take that lightly. We take it very seriously, but I don't believe we take ourselves too seriously.
I know Melissa has been with you for a long time, as has been Mark Byers, but you've also added 3 people within the last 5 years.
Yes, we've had to because of expansion. And Melissa's coming up on 20 years, if you can imagine that.
Hired her right out of high
19.
school, did you?
Yes, we did. Yes, we have expanded with Jen and Grassel coming on board about a year and a half ago, and Pat Gephardt is in his 6th year. So we've have a lot of experience from those people, even though they have only been in our staff a little bit. Their sports and their experience in athletics has been expansive. Pat, over 25 years, a registered basketball official. Jen is a college basketball coach for almost 10 years and a teacher before that. So we have great folks, and Melissa and Marco, without saying, they're the 2 best people that any state could rely on.
I would agree with that 100%. I don't know the 3 newer additions as well, but certainly Melissa and Mark, credit to themselves and PIAA. And speaking of officiating, you and I connected way back when you got involved with officiating, and through our mutual friend, the late Bernie Romanowski. But I know officiating is still very close to your heart, and as I see it right now, you could use some help.
Well, yes, the National Federation, as well as our association, has started an initiative to try to attract some young people, because some of our age of our referees that have been around is getting up there in years, and we need some new blood to get in there and help us. Right now, we're probably one of the biggest states with about 14,000 referees, and we need more. And the reason we need more is the expansion of junior high and middle school programs. You could work, if you are a young person of college age or minimally 18 years of age and a high school graduate, you could work probably every day of the week in many of our sports, and sports such as field hockey and wrestling, swimming and diving, track, where you really have to have a background in the sport. Those sports are needed badly.
I think it's interesting that with the explosion of sports, that more young people aren't attracted to this, and PIAA has made it rather easy to apply and take the test.
Right, you can apply and take the test online now. It's a small stipend of $30. You can take the test rate at your home on your home computer. We try to encourage people, please do not take the exam without getting the practice test, which we send them as a primer, and going through it and reading the rule book. Because we have a lot of folks out there who say, oh, I've been around this sport my whole life. I've coached basketball. I've been around basketball since I've been 7 years old. And the first question on the exam is, what's the width of the line on the basketball court? And that's one wrong right off Jump Street, because people don't read the rule book.
I have found over the years that coaches don't know the rules. And when there's a discussion about a controversial play or a rule interpretation, what they think is correct and what is correct are 2 entirely different things. One of the things we need to emphasize is there's a very strenuous background check if you decide to become involved in officiating.
Yes, and those background checks that have come out of the Department of Education for anyone on a school campus now is a safety concern, and we've embraced that. And we would have liked to have had a little more lead time when it first was put out on us, but we've adapted, and I think everyone that goes through it accepts it, especially at this time and date that we are with some of the things that are going on across not only the country but the world.
One of the things that people will ask me occasionally as an official, how do you get assigned to the state tournament? The district tournament, you have a head of officials. He'll assign the games for District 4, Kevin McNamara basketball. Right. He assigns the officials. How do you get from there to Hershey?
Well, what we do is we ask every one of our 12 districts to prepare for us a list of officials that have worked in their tournament and have worked X number of games that are active during the year, and that they've also gone through the clearances. They've performed at the district level at the highest level by working a semifinal or a final. We want the best of the best. And also those folks that have attended our officials convention once in the last 5 years. It's a continuing education component because we want the people that are not only the best officials, but the best educated officials, because it's important to those schools and their communities, the coaches and the players, to have people out there that are the best of their craft.
Interestingly enough, I know Buzz Carr, God rest his soul, started putting crews together, particularly in football, and I think it has worked out well. Any thought of putting, now with the three-man officiating crews, any thought about putting crews together towards the end of the regular season and have them work their way in the state tournament?
Many districts do that now, and some of the districts we try to do that with and advance them that way. Some of the problems have come up that sometimes Tom and Melissa are really good, but Bob's lousy. And you don't want to hurt the advancement of some quality people if you can find another person that may fit in there very well and work with them cooperatively as a team. So we try to do a little balance with that in consultation with the local district officials rep on developing people as they move forward.
Yeah, and with athlete safety first in line, you've got to have competent people.
It's priority one.
Yeah, take
priority one.
Take care of the kids. The officials convention is your baby, right?
Yeah, I guess you'd say that.
Sure.
We're coming up this year on our 24th, and next year is going to be our 25th, and we're really proud of it. We've had some outstanding speakers. We've grown from maybe a handful. I think you might have been there in some of the earlier years.
Absolutely.
And right now we have over 1,000 people annually. And it's probably the biggest interscholastic sports officiating convention in the country.
And it's being held at?
Harrisburg Hilton.
Give yourself a plug here.
First weekend of August, and we have some really dynamic speakers coming in again. Over the years, we've had, Gene Steratore that just worked the Super Bowl for the NFL. Tom Stabile has worked the Super Bowl. We've had Steve Javie, a long time
NBA official,
that was also a 30-year high school official for us.
Really?
That gives back every year by being involved in the Norristown basketball chapter. We really have some quality folks. One year we had Dee Cantor come in and speak.
First woman to officiate in the NBA.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
And she's out of the Reading area.
Yes, she is.
So
Exeter Township High School.
yes,
Yeah.
I mean, she was fabulous. So we've had a litany of really quality people, and we try to highlight our good folks from Pennsylvania in our program, much like you do here at Mount Carmel. The lineage here is pretty steep.
Yes, it is.
In not only football, but all sports across the board. And they've had some outstanding people here. And the beauty of it here at Mount Carmel is hopefully what we have at PIAA, people come back and give back.
Yes, they do.
And it's not just you can't take, you got to give it back to your community and our association. And we hope to try to transform into a regulatory agency into a service agency. And that's not an easy lift. It's a heavy lift.
You know, it's interesting because one of the outgrowths of that convention is you build camaraderie between officials. A guy from District 4 meets a guy from 6, and they get to be buddies. And it just, I think, helps things flow a little bit better. It's good for morale. Guys can sit down, talk about games they had, situations they had, how they handled them, what would you do. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Well, thank you. And I agree with you 100% because there's a saying that the fifth quarter sometimes is as important as the first four.
Yes, it is.
And that's the one where you sit down after the game and you talk about it, whether you're having a piece of pizza or a sandwich.
Or
maybe
maybe a libation.
you might, or maybe it's just somebody even sitting there after the game with an evaluator and taking 10, 15 minutes and saying, hey, what did you have here? What did you see? And would you have looked at it this way? And those type of things are invaluable.
Sure they were. And when you talk to fellow officials, you get ideas about positioning. You learn when not to blow the whistle. All of those type of things come into play. Let's talk about site selection a little bit, because officials obviously are involved in the playoff games. I know you and I had a conversation one time, and someone said, well, why isn't the game being played here? The school didn't want the game.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy as you think. And I know, as we talked off camera here a little bit, for football, artificial turf is a prerequisite.
Yeah, that's really priority one. We will schedule a game if it is an outstanding facility and can host it on grass. However, they're limited. The onset of athletic artificial turf across the Commonwealth has exploded, and that's really helpful to us, especially to the weather conditions we have. And you need to put teams and the players in the best conditions available. I think the biggest misconception out there in the general public is just because facilities exist that you can go there. Most of our colleges in the eastern part of the state will not allow us on their campuses.
Okay.
They want it for their students first, or their sport teams first, and then we become secondary. And by the time they go through the red tape to get something approved, we can't get there. So a lot of those questions, well, why don't they go to this college, and why don't they go to that college? Well, they're not available to us.
That's right.
And a lot of our schools have told us, look, we're going to take care of our school community, and we have a band concert going on, and we have theater going on, we have community activities going on. We're not disrupting them to put a playoff game there. And we understand that, but it also adds to the challenge of scheduling places. I know, and now with the advent of a lot of schools, because of the growth of schools in the east compared to the west, and the disparage of maybe the number of schools playing in a classification in that, we had to try to level the playing field and expand. With schools traveling farther now, they may have to travel a little farther to get to a better site because places are not available. And we've had some schools just flat out say, look, you're not coming here anymore. We've had too much damage to our facility by fans that come.
Any thought given to media accommodations when you're picking sites?
Yes, we do. We do. It's part of a number of things that we talk over and going to sites. There's a place that for years that we always liked to use because geographically it was a fit, but it had no press box, so to speak. I mean, the press box was about the size of the table here.
Okay.
So we would shy away from that because the media couldn't get there and report their scores or be able to give an account of the game. And there was no seating for TV or radio folks. So, you know, sometimes that doesn't happen. I know in baseball and softball, Melissa Annual gets a complaint for some one fellow that a particular nature in the western part of the state. Hey, they didn't have any place for me to call the game for the softball field, but it's a brand new softball field. Well, sometimes we weigh that, and we try to make sure that the players and the teams are taken care of first and foremost.
If you've got a place to plug in, you got a place to do the game. I mean, I've done numerous games from the bleachers.
Yep.
If you want to cover the game, you'll find a way to
Sitting in the back of the truck,
right.
I'm sure, with a folding chair.
And you'll find a way to get it covered.
Right.
Doctor, one of the real success stories, certainly in this area, is the co-op programs. And credit to Mount Carmel Area Athletic Director Greg Sakavich, Our Lady of the Lord's Athletic Director Mike Lombardi. They are currently co-oping 9 sports between the 2 schools, and it's worked beautifully. Do you see this expanding due to the smaller rural schools not being able to field, for example, a full golf team or a full volleyball team? Do you see this expanding?
I think we've seen some expansion already in that, Tom, and I don't think it's going to diminish. I think it's going to continue to grow. Those 2 athletic directors you mentioned are outstanding. And, you know, the best thing about athletics, I know we always want to put our arm around the champion, but the best thing about athletics is the participation in it. The lessons that are learned there in that part of the classroom is vital to, I think, a young person's growth. Because as much as you learn many of those things in a classroom, cooperation, teamwork, discipline, dedication, time management, loyalty to a teammate, playing by rules, a code of conduct, they're all things that athletics are front and center, and I think they're outstanding.
Well, General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, on the fields of friendly strife, are sown the seeds that on other fields will bear the fruits of victory. And I'm starting to get concerned to the point where, are we getting away from that? The values, it seems to me that there is more and more emphasis on winning and less emphasis in developing the whole athlete.
Well, I do think, Tom, that there is a segment out there that everybody has to get a trophy.
Yes.
And unfortunately, athletics are not that way.
Life is not that way.
Life is not that way, and athletics are not that way. We have the conversation in the office many, many times, and all of us in there have played athletics at the collegiate level, and we all know that none of us won a state title. But the values that we learned far outweighed our success, whether it be individually or as a team. And I think that's the real lesson and beauty of athletics, is the participation in it. And it's important, and you have it here at Mount Carmel. Boy, you really want to do well and you want to be successful, but it's the striving to do well, the striving and the dedication to achieve that's the life lesson that is more than winning the gold all the time.
And if you fall down, get back up.
Got to get back up.
Absolutely.
Got to get back up.
Doctor, we're in our second year now, the classifications, which are boys and girls, basketball, softball, football, and who am I leaving out?
Baseball.
Baseball. Any thoughts of expanding other sports into the 6 classifications?
Well, not so much for 6. We did expand soccer. We did expand boys and girls lacrosse. We did expand field hockey. We did expand girls volleyball. So we expanded 6 girls sports and 5 boys sports when we moved from 4 to 6 in basketball and football. And I think they have been overwhelmingly successful. And the feedback we're hearing from school people are, I'm now playing a school closer to my size.
Enrollment.
And that has helped. As you know, we have floated out there a super class, a 7th class,
Let's talk
because
about that a little.
we floated that out there to the board, and the board accepted it on a first reading. And the reason being is we've always heard the complaint that people in 6 classes that may be playing loose and fast with the rules have nowhere to go. And if we could possibly make them move up, it would level the playing field. So we've developed as a staff a proposal to the board that takes into consideration their enrollment, their success in the previous 2-year classification period, and the number of transfers that they receive.
Okay.
So you'll have their regular enrollment, their success is a point system for
Right.
2 years. It's really quite simple. And the number of transfers that they get in the 2-year classification. And then if it's such and such, it stays the same. If it's over a certain number, it goes up. And I think it may solve some of the angst that's out there.
Well, according to official documentation, you get 1 point for participation in a district championship game, 2 for a quarterfinal, 3 in a semifinal or interdistrict, 4 for participation in an interdistrict contest. Now, the big talk at the basketball tournament this year was the fact that Kennedy Christian, Kennedy Catholic wants to go from single A to 6A. Is that doable under this system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in their case, say that they go to 6A, and in a 2-year period, they would accumulate, say, 6 points.
Okay.
4 for a final, and then another 2 for a quarterfinal.
Okay,
Then the following year, they would be in the superclass.
okay.
And I think that would be very, very helpful, that a school could either move up to the superclass, or a school could choose to go up to the superclass.
From any 4A, 5A, whatever, if you want to play
Right.
what would be now 7A, I guess,
Right.
you can choose to do that.
Right. But I think the real impact of this competition classification formula is not the 6 to 7. It's the A to 2A, the 2A to 3A, and those type of schools that are perennially either having success or taking transfers, and the word we hear out on the street is reloading,
Yes,
then they would move up in classification and have to play schools that are a little keener in competition and more like them in success.
providing they meet the qualifications that we're going to talk about here as far as transfers
Yep.
are concerned. I guess the two hot button things right now are transfers and private schools, or boundary schools and non-boundary schools. And I think we'll start with boundary and non-boundary schools. PIAA accepted Catholic schools and private schools in 1972, but it was a state law that brought them in. So right now, you had your little survey out in District 7, 70 or 80% prefer the separate brackets on, but this is not something that you can change.
No, we believe that if the General Assembly would like to change the public school code, that they changed in 1972, because for any of your listeners out there, I know you remember, Tom, we were just like Maryland or New York. We were a public school association only.
Right.
The act of the legislature in 1972, not only, the original amendment was to allow parochial schools, private schools, to participate in PIAA postseason championships.
Exactly.
That was amended to say we are going to take them as full members of PIAA. Now, our interpretation of that is we have to treat everybody the same. And if the General Assembly wants to change it, we're good. We'll follow the law. But right now, some of the things that we were talking about, we're trying to work within the parameters of our association that we have dictated to us by the General Assembly and address them. We don't believe in segregation. We want to make sure that we treat all schools equally, and by looking at a competition formula, that would be one way. The other point that I'd just like to make is we don't classify schools by boundary and non-boundary. That's, I think, a media catchphrase.
Okay.
We believe schools are traditional schools or schools of choice. That aligns itself with the General Assembly's feeling that mom and dad should have the choice of where they're going to educate their student, whether it be in a public school, a private school, a parochial school, an academy, a preparatory school, a legacy school, a charter school. That's up to them. We have had some very frank discussion with the leadership in the General Assembly, and they have told us in no certain terms that that's part of their platform, and they want that to be not us to be banging a drum that's saying there's something wrong out there. So we'll follow their lead, and we will work within the parameters we have to try to adjust it.
I think it's important that our viewers realize that, well, the PIAA isn't doing anything. It's not a PIAA issue. It's a legislative issue.
That's a General Assembly issue. If they want to change the law back to the other way,
fine.
that'd be fine.
But you're not in a position to do that, and I think people need to
Right.
know that.
And I don't think that the General Assembly wants to take that on. I've always heard that's the third rail.
Well, it probably is. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But what I think is interesting is it's been on the books since '72, but I think within the last decade, this thing has become a hot button issue. And part of it is that the private schools, the charter schools are winning championships, and public schools are not.
Right. I agree with that. And I think the landscape changed when we took in, we added Philadelphia.
Yes.
With 7 million people in the area, the challenges they have down there are probably a lot different than me growing up in Lake Ariel and going to a small public school at the time. However, everybody has to adhere to the same rules. I think our district down there is doing a pretty good job getting their arms around things. But Tom, nobody is upset at any private or charter school that doesn't win.
That's correct.
It's all about success. And I believe, and as our staff believes, that addressing success is important. I know right over the hill here, we have a very successful public school in the sport of football that there's a lot of people that are upset with them because they are perennial champions. And there's a lot of rumor and innuendo. I don't believe right now there hasn't been anything of a factual basis, but if there is and they bring it forward, we'll address it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When I was first coaching at Lord's in the 70s, and we had Division I athletes, that's all you heard was, well, Lord's recruiting. Well, nobody's complaining right now because they're not having that type of success in all sports. So again, it comes down to winning, people being unhappy, and these charter schools, which just kind of like pop up periodically, I think they're double dipping on the taxpayer. For example, if a charter school opens up in, let's say, Pottsville, and they have a basketball team, Pottsville taxpayers not only have to fund the school, but they have to fund the basketball team. It seems to me that if you want to play basketball, you should play at Pottsville High School.
And I don't disagree with that, Tom. As a matter of fact, I've been testified in front of the Pennsylvania Athletic Oversight Committee that charter school students are the only ones with dual eligibility. They can participate, like you said, at that charter school, and then if they don't have the sport, they can go back to the public school of their residence and play there. No other kid in the state of Pennsylvania has that opportunity. And as you said, the funding is double, and
Sure.
I'm sure our public schools aren't very happy with that.
Now, homeschooling, I'm not going to draw this out here. Homeschooling has become, in your 30 years, how that has developed.
Changed.
Yes, tremendously.
Tremendously, yes.
And I would think that if, depending on who's doing the homeschooling, directly affects the type of education that young man or young girl is getting, but they are available to play in their local district.
That's correct, and that's by state law.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the transfer rule. Okay, this is another thing that has come up, and it was spurred on initially by the young lady from Virginia who transferred into District 12, finished her season in Virginia, wound up playing for Goretti, and of course Goretti went on to win a state championship.
Right.
And you guys got hammered for this,
Sure. Yeah.
but it wasn't a PIAA issue. First of all, there was nothing in the bylaws that said you could not do this.
Right.
But secondly, it was a District 12 issue.
It was the District 12 issue. And to their credit, they handled it the best they could. The scenario was they held the young lady out 21 days. She didn't play.
Let's talk
They
about,
went-
let me interrupt, talk
Sure.
about the 21-day rule.
Okay. Well, this part of the transfer rule was already in the pipeline.
Okay.
It was in the fall. A young man went from a school in New Jersey to a Pennsylvania school after he completed his football season. And we had a loophole. So we started the process in December of putting in a 21-day sit-out and adding to it a 50% completion of your season, maximum number of contests in a season that you then couldn't play. We were in the second reading that it was going to pass in March. Well, when does this young lady transfer before the board can take action? So we took a licking over that. But what the 21-day rule is simply this. If you transfer from school A to school B in season, once the practice the first practice of the sport starts to the championship game or to the end of your school season, you have to sit out 21 calendar days. And then if you've completed more than 50% of the maximum number, take basketball, it's 22 games.
Right.
If she played in 11 games, now she would have completed her season and she couldn't have played for Goretti.
Right, she would be
We did
ineligible.
not have that on the books. We got caught a month short. Nobody likes it. We weren't happy about it. Do I think it impacted the team? No, they were strong enough to beat anybody with who they had. But it certainly was a public
Nightmare.
relations nightmare,
Sure.
and it certainly didn't look good. We don't like it. We've tried to take actions to correct it. Funny, Virginia, where she left, had a similar rule that they changed, that you could go from school A to school B in the playoffs and play right away.
Wow.
And they've changed that, much the same that we've changed ours after having troubles. And unfortunately, sometimes you're a day late and a dollar short, but we understand what's going on. It's just not necessarily catch them until they occur.
I should mention to our viewers, if you're just tuning in, this is Dr. Robert Lombardi, Executive Director of the PIAA. I'm Tom Ryan, and we're talking about the transfer rule. And it seems to me that a lot of things could be handled a bit differently, in that the first person who has an opportunity to deny a student transfer, and I think it's kind of facetious in a way, that they're transferring for academic reasons. The principal who signs off on that transfer is saying, in essence, well, this school district can give this youngster a better education than the school district I work in. So you could stop it, or at least cut down on these transfers, if they would say, no, we're not going to sign off, and then from then it goes to the district committee.
Right, that's correct. And I understand a lot of rhetoric that we've heard is principals are so inundated anymore with state testing and some of the other duties that they have, that if a student doesn't want to be in their school, they would just soon jettison them and let them go to wherever they want. They may have parental involvement that is troublesome to the school, so they don't want to fight the fight of going through a hearing. And that's difficult. That's why we think that maybe looking at this competition formula would solve some of that, because as you well know, pressure locally is difficult.
Absolutely.
And when people are putting a lot of pressure on someone to allow someone to go to school A to school B, how can you deny my student the opportunity, or my son or daughter the opportunity? And it's a difficult.
And I think you touched on one of the things that probably leads to a lot of these transfers, and that the principal are glad, maybe not so much to get the youngster out of the building, get the parents out of the building, because they begin to harass you about various things. But again, it goes back to something we touched on not too long ago. It comes down to winning. It's a matter of, if Team B has a great team and no quarterback, but Team A does not have a good team and a great quarterback, all of a sudden we want to transfer for academic reasons.
And it occurs, and I would
Sure
be,
it does.
if I would be foolish to sit here and tell you that it doesn't. And we've all seen it. And Tom, you know yourself as I do, and you've been around for years and years. Someone that wants to beat a rule will find a way.
Sure.
I don't know if you can write the perfect rule for anything. I know I speak to my colleagues in other states, and they don't have an answer for the transfer rule. And many of them have come and stole some of the items that we have from us, because ours has been built by the court system. Sure. And it's at least an individual assessment has to be made on each student, but that doesn't make it easy. Going back to District 12 quickly, they followed the process. Even without the rule being in place, the 21-day sit-out. She sat out 21 days. They had a hearing, but to the chagrin of most of the people in northeastern Pennsylvania that played against that school in the postseason, the committee voted to give her eligibility, because they didn't have enough information to hang their hat on a specific bylaw to hold her out. And we didn't have anything there clearly to do it. So shame on us for maybe not having something more expansive, but now I think we have a workable rule that will be helpful.
We're going to talk about that in a second, but I think it's interesting. The District 12 committee didn't take the heat. The PIAA took the heat, and it was certainly a District 12 issue. I had a brief conversation with the District 12 representative, and I said, "Do you enjoy your job?" He said, "Well, if you enjoy being a fireman," he said, "I'm putting fires out three or 4 days a week." So
Well, I have a nice target that I could put on the back of his coat.
Yes.
If he would like.
yes,
That I get to wear.
Yep, throw your darts here. Exactly. Now, a proposal
Yeah.
has come in about transfer students, which I think is innovative, and I think it really has a chance to put some teeth into this. Would you explain that to our viewers, please?
The transfer now that people don't seem to be upset if someone goes at the end of the natural break. Like usually in a lot of schools, it's the end of 8th grade before 9th grade. That's the usual natural break for a school. And most people don't care if you leave at 8th grade and go to a public, a private, or a charter. Where they get upset is after someone goes to school maybe 1 or 2 years, and the illustration that you just gave about, I need a quarterback.
Yep.
Those scenarios are out there, and then they move from school A to school B. So now, part of our transfer rule will include, if you transfer after the natural break, and you participated in that sport the previous year, you can play, but you sit out the first season, postseason. You sit out. So let me give you this scenario. Where you've completed your sophomore year. They need a quarterback at ABC High School. You're going to be a junior and you go from school A to school B. You may play for school B. However, you're going to sit out postseason for school B. That is just passed. We'll see how that.
And when will this go into effect?
That'll go into effect July 1.
All right. So
And that will be interesting because there is a hardship provision in there. There are cases. We have the Army War College in Carlisle where people come in all the time from other states. They're assigned by the Department of the Army. Well, that may be an exception. Or a bona fide job change. Not that you went from school A to school B, which is 5 miles away.
Right.
We're talking about across the state, those type of things. So there is a hardship provision, but it is very narrow in scope, and we hope that that will help deter some of this athletically motivated transfers.
interestingly enough, you're going to put a committee together to investigate some of these transfers. And in order for you to do that, people have to step up and say, we have an issue here, because you cannot enforce what's going on if you don't know what's going on.
Correct. And our board looked at what the NCAA is doing with their enforcement committee, that part of it came out of Condoleezza Rice's review and what they had with their agents and the AAU basketball and Adidas and all those type of sponsorships. So we felt that that's something to get in front of the board if we could establish a enforcement, for the lack of a better term, enforcement or investigative committee where a panel of 3 people that are familiar with our rules can go to a school that may have some questionable transfers or maybe questionable adherence to bylaws.
Right.
I think the viewers out there all know the situation that occurred over 20 years ago with a young man going from a Philadelphia school to a public school in our area. And that certainly caused
It did.
a real firestorm.
Sure.
So we're taking a look at those type of things, and maybe if we can get people to tap the brakes and take a deep breath, maybe we can slow down some of this things that we feel are inappropriate.
You know what I think is interesting? You know, we're going here in the right direction, but let no one misunderstood. This is going to be a difficult thing to enforce.
Correct. It is.
And you're going to need the cooperation of the schools involved. You're going to need people to step up and take responsibility for this. And if things aren't going quite the way they should, this is not PIAA. This is the local, the district, whatever, that isn't getting the job done on your end. Everything shouldn't wind up in Mechanicsburg. Things should be settled at the district level.
Right.
And I know this is the aim of this, is to keep things within the district level. And if they cannot, then they come to the board.
Come to the board.
But I think you've done, taken a positive step here. I think it's extremely innovative. And this applies 9th, 10th, 11th grade.
Right.
In other words, if you're a freshman wrestler and you decide to transfer to a better school, you are not eligible for the state tournament. You're not eligible for districts.
That's
You're
correct.
regular season only.
Regular season only. Ends with any league or conference playoffs. That's it. They're done. So it's definitely a change. Of course, we've had a real paradigm shift on the board on philosophy. And the board is very concerned about the duties of the principal and how much they have on their plate with the state testing and all the things that are put on their plate. And we're very, very lucky in your area here. You have excellent athletic directors, tremendous athletic administrators, and they do a great job, but they know the deal in a lot of cases. And I think it's important that the general public out there knows that people aren't sitting on their hands. We've worked very hard here. In the last year of our competition committee, we've redone the athletic transfer waiver request form. It has been overhauled, added other items onto it. The 21-day sit-out rule. Now the postseason sit-out, which was originally junior to senior only. Now the board is drilled down a little more. And people know what's going on. And here's the funny thing that people I don't think realize. My daughter youngest daughter is just graduating high school. She played athletics. We're out in the booster club stands selling hot dogs, doing it. Melissa, Mark, Pat has grandkids, Jen's kids. We're all involved in our community. So we see it and hear it too. But we're trying to work through our processes to address it.
Well, the fact that the administration is not sitting in an ivory tower. You're out there, you're among the people. You get to talk to people. You get, what's the guy in the street saying?
Yep.
I think one of the things that I was always impressed about Mr. Warner, God rest him, a former superintendent here, he taught a class for a long time.
Yep.
And the last 10 minutes of the class, he just sit there and listen to the kids and get a feel for what's going on. And the fact that you're out and you're mingling with people and talking to people, you do get a sense of what's going on. And I think people have to step up here and say, we have something here. We go to a district official and say, we've got something here you think we should take a look at.
Right.
And don't stand and complain about it.
Yes.
Do something about it.
Yeah, stand up and be counted. We get a lot of people who like to throw the ball through the window and hide their hand.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's unfortunate, but we don't live in that world.
No.
And we can't live in that world because the courts and due process have dictated to us certain standards of care for students. So we're going to make sure that we do it fairly and evenly across the board. And I think we got something here that's doable. I will tell you this. I've been there 30 years, Tom. You know that. You've known me for a long time. I'm always out at games. I'm always.
Sure, you're around.
I think I made a home at Mart's for
Yeah,
years
sure.
when I was working with the officials. But we really want to make this better for everybody.
Well, and I think another thing is people should realize you're very accessible. You have an 800 number. If you have a complaint, pick up the phone and call and, identify yourself and say, I think you people should take a look at this. The anonymous letter's the big thing.
Yeah.
You get enough of those. But you're very accessible.
Or we'll get people to say, well, just throw them all out. Or they're all ineligible. That's not doable. It's
Doesn't
not
work that
possible.
way. No, it does not. Dr. Lombardi, just some general questions that people have asked me to ask you, and one of them is, with the size of District 3, 4, 7, and 10, is there any thought whatsoever to perhaps cutting them down in size and adding districts?
Well, that's an interesting concept. I have not heard that. What we're hearing is we'd rather see downsizing come, where that District 7 and 8 would merge, District 5 and 6 would merge.
Okay.
District 11 would split in half, and part of it would go to 1, the rest would go to 2. and maybe District 4 would go in with 2, 4, and 11 because they sub-region now in some
Okay.
sports. And the rationale is they'd like to have an 8-district state because for bracketing purposes,
Be
it would make things so much easier. Right now, with some of our bracketing and the number of schools, take 6A and girls and boys basketball, we have 11 qualifiers coming out of District 1. We think that is way too many, but it is the proportion that we have, and our brackets have been set on a proportional representation based on the number of schools in that class by district. That seems to be the fairest. But you see the disparity, and with, like you said, the population is moving east, schools are closing.
Sure.
The people in the West aren't happy about that. They would like to have not a 5-round tournament in 6A basketball. They'd like to have a 4-round and come in 1 round short. Well, the East goes, no, how do they play one less game, you know? So,
And speaking of brackets, once again, there cannot be separate brackets unless the legislature
for
change-
private and public,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
They
And
would
I
have
mean,
to do that.
And I remember when this District 7 survey came out, there were separate brackets, and that's not your bailiwick. I mean, that's up to the legislature to do something. All right, one of the other questions
Well, the
that,
survey was flawed. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about leading questions.
Well,
I don't think our
I saw the
I don't
questions.
think our attorney would be happy with a witness being able to see some of those.
see, I feel the same way about all surveys. It depends who you ask.
Exactly.
And again, I think it comes down to winning, and let's kind of ask the people that are going to go along with what we want to do. And but I mean, it's interesting that you would think about downsizing rather than
Yes.
Tell me about District 8. A lot of people say, "What's the story on District 8?" It's that little circle in the middle of 7, and there's only what 4 or 5 schools. Is that correct?
No, they have a few more than that.
Okay.
I think they're at 8.
Oh, 8. Okay.
They're down to 8
Yeah.
they were at one time 12, but they're down to 8. And they're basically the city of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
You know, it's interesting to show how astute the legislature was when they changed the public school code. There's only one private school in Pittsburgh, and in the school
city.
right, in the school code, it was written that the private school in the city of Pittsburgh could not belong to the city athletic program. They could join a neighboring athletic association, which was, of course, District 7 or the WPIL.
Right.
It's written right in the public school code.
Interesting.
So whoever drafted that was influential enough from that private sector because they didn't want them participating with the city schools. They wanted them with the suburban schools. Isn't that a little interesting?
Yes, it is. More than
nugget.
Yes, more than a little interesting. Any chance that the clock is coming to high school basketball?
That's a good question. I was on the basketball committee a number of years ago, National Federation Basketball Committee, when it was discussed. I think at some time it may come because of the changes in technology. What we're hearing right now across the country is cost for schools that are under strict budgets and reduced budgets and having a hard time meeting budgets to have to put 2 or 3 clocks. Obviously, you're going to have 2 in a gym. If you have multiple gyms, they have more. What levels are you going to put the clock in? Is it going to be a 30-second, a 45, a 35? There's a lot of questions there. Federation wants to discuss putting a section in the rule book because you're going to need it. What happens if the clock stops, a ball out of bounds, an infraction, a malfunction, all the things that are being handled at the collegiate level. So that needs to be put in there. And the argument always comes, well, we do it at the college level. Well, if you go to a college game, you almost always see an adult on the clock or the scorebook. Sure. We don't have that luxury in high school. You see a lot of students sometimes doing scorebooks as well as clock operation.
In the state finals, let's say basketball and football in particular, they're, I think, probably the highest revenue sports. Any talk about instant replay? Take a look at things.
Our board has passed a number of years ago that we can look at replay in state finals.
Okay.
To make a determination on a play. If it's a timing situation,
Understand.
good or no good, those type of things. So we have that in, but it can't be a handheld, can't be me or you in the stands. It has to be a production company used. That's why it's for state finals pretty much only.
Has it been used?
We have not used it to date,
Okay.
but we have it there. We do use FAT in track, and we've gone as far as tens of thousandth of a second
Wow.
to break a tie in a race in the track final, because with the high-tech scoring software, you can draw a line and go to the 10,000s. It's
Amazing.
amazing. I think may even go to the hundreds, but we've used to 10 already. So it's kind of interesting that way. One last thing about the shot clock, there is a concern that you make the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, because that takes a strategy away from a coach, and where he can hold the ball a little bit. Villanova and Kentucky is the big one years ago. But you see our Philadelphia teams run up and down, run up and down. There's no slowing them down.
Sure.
And if you have to shoot in 30 seconds, you play right into their hands sometimes.
So it can
That's
interesting
That's just,
observation, yes.
it's just again, that's just
Right.
what we've heard around the table, not only Pennsylvania-wise, but nationally. So,
I'll get you out of here on this
Sure.
one. Future of the PIAA, what do you see over the horizon? What's coming up, things you're excited about?
well, we're excited about trying to get some of these things in. I would really like to see this competitive classification formula go, at least to try it. Because if we don't try something new, it's same old, and that seems to fly in the face of what the general public wants. So if I had a magic wand, that would be one of them. I think the safety of our athletes is first and foremost. I think you're going to see some real changes in some of the way that coaches coach football, especially because of the injury rate, especially the concern of concussion.
Sure.
You've already seen a lot of innovation with equipment that will change things. I think you're going to see, as time goes by, I think with the way interscholastic athletics are going, I hope it comes back to the middle and gets away from everybody has to win a trophy.
Yeah, I do too.
Or if I don't win a trophy, then I'm going to take my ball and go home, because we're going to say something's not right or fair, and let's napalm the whole situation. I don't think that's good at all. That's not the lesson of athletics, and I'm disappointed in people that either say that way or take that position, because I'm not sure that any of them wore the uniform if they take that position, because the athlete and most people say, nope, we want to play.
I would agree with that, and I think that with your leadership and the fine staff that you have, high school athletics in the state of Pennsylvania are in good hands, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Lombardi, Executive Director of the PIAA. I'm Tom Ryan. Thank you for being with us.